Welcome back to another episode of Leadership from the Heart. I'm Elizabeth Riley, Lux Property Group, brokered by EXP out of Austin, Texas, and I'm joined by my dear friend Renee Funk out of Orlando, Florida. And we
Hello.
are so excited about our guest today. I'm a little bit biased because I've known Yvonne Taylor for many, many, many years. Our children, we met because our children were in school together in elementary school. Our oldest, actually, you have one, and Yvonne, if you need some more, I have a few I can send to you. But our oldest kids, our boys, were in school together, and we became friends that way. But it wasn't until a few years ago that we crossed paths in a different way, in a unique way, as business owners, as women in business, as boss babes. And so I am so excited about this conversation today. So, hello, Renee. Hello, Yvonne.
Hello there. Hello, Yvonne.
Hi. I'm so glad to be joining both of you. Really excited to talk. Elizabeth is always so full of energy and so full of encouragement. And I'm just really glad to be with both of y'all to talk about work and women in work and women in business.
You're so sweet. This will be the Elizabeth hour. No, I'm playing. So normally we get in and we're just talking about questions, but I want to give a little bit backstory if that's okay. Like I mentioned, our kids went to school together. I was blessed that you were one of my clients. So a while ago, I helped you sell your home, and then we bought another home, which was so amazing. The views, right? But
Yes.
you and your son, and it was just a really great, stable, new chapter for you. And we just actually sold that home so you can start a new chapter. And it was from that closing. We were both sitting at the closing table talking about what she was going to do. And we'll dive into this a little bit deeper. But the reason she was selling this dream home of hers was because you realized it's time for me to invest in me. And I have so much to offer, and I have so much to give, and this is me time. And I just think that's so awesome, because I think as women, sometimes we put ourselves second. Actually, I know we do, right? Whether we're a wife, mother, business owner, whatever, we all of our needs tend to come second. And so the power that was in that room and the energy, just you and I having that conversation, that you're like, I'm owning this. I know I have so much to give. I'm just so excited about this. So I was speaking last week at an event in Dallas, and one of the things I talked about was women empowerment. And really, how does one come into women empowerment? Because again, I think we're our own worst critics, and we don't give ourselves credit, and we don't give ourselves grace, and we treat others far better than we treat ourselves. And I talk to people about, okay, what's your story? Right? Who are you as a person? Who are you as a being? So I'm going to start that with you, Yvonne, because you've got so much to share.
You froze for me just a little bit, but I think
You're back. You're back.
okay. And I think the question was like basically, what's my story, right?
Yeah. Who are you? Yeah.
Who am I? And I think that's really important. Thank you for asking, because it's my work. What I do is tied up in who I am, and the perspectives that who I am like brings me. And so I'm an Army brat. I've lived in a lot of places. I live here in Austin now, and I do consider myself a Texan, but by way of living on both coasts and overseas growing up. And I really think that those experiences growing up helped me kind of get to know lots of different types of people and different cultures. And that is a big part of who I am. Who I am today, a big part of my identity is a mom. I'm a single mom. I'm a single mom to a 16-year-old, Alexander, as you know. And being a single parent is difficult. It's difficult no matter what your level of education, or what your socioeconomic status. When it's all kind of on you, it's really, it's hard. Every single decision about another person's life is like on my shoulders. But those kinds of things, us as moms and as single moms, and having that kind of responsibility also really ties into being able to be an entrepreneur, because we're entrepreneurs every day in our homes. We have to make all kinds of decisions, not only for ourselves, but for our families. All kinds of decisions, whether it's about healthcare, whether it's about food and nutrition, running our households. A lot of that work falls on moms, whether they're partnered or not. And so that's also a big part of who I am. And one of those places where I know that I have tremendous skills that lead right into running a business. Because running a household and running, the lives of ourselves and our families is like running a business. I'm also an educator. I was an AP English teacher. I also was a community college English teacher, and I've worked in higher education for years and years as a communicator, and education is my passion. So those big pieces are like who I am, and it's also connected to the work that I'm now doing in my business, Equity Within.
So go ahead, Renee, you go first.
I just want to say, first of all, teachers are such a needed talent, and you are all angels on earth that are not regarded and rewarded at the level that you should be. And so I look at, when we have the opportunity to drop our kiddos off at school every single day, I mean, I feel like the real work is being done by the care and love and attention, passion that the teachers are instilling into our kids. It's something I have a lot of respect for. So thank you for that.
Teachers are leaders in their classrooms. And I think recognizing the leadership of teachers is really important. And as you mentioned, it's often unrecognized.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that it's unrecognized is, and this goes into some of what my business is about, is that teaching, like nursing, is and professions like that are gendered professions.
Yeah.
There are professions where there are a lot of women doing them. And because of that, they don't get the respect or the pay that other professions do. And so that's highly tied into what my business is about as well.
Share about that, because you and I were talking about Equity Within and what your goal was and where it came from, right? And it was fascinating because you knew your stats, and some of the information you were sharing was jaw-dropping. Mm-hmm. And like Renee said, we know that teachers are so important in every day, whether it's, all the way from preschool up to college and PhD, right? They're so important in our community. But when you started digging into the stats a little bit and kind of what made you decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to do something a little bit differently. I think there's a need here, and I'm going to create Equity Within. Talk about that journey. Talk about what Equity Within is and why that came to be.
Right. So Equity Within was really born out of my own experiences. My experience as a woman, as a Black woman, as a Black queer woman, as a mom, working in typically in higher ed organizations. I've worked at 5 institutions of higher ed in marketing and development. And so I've worked as a staff member in higher ed. A lot of times when people think of higher ed, they think of professors, but they forget that there are staff.
Yeah.
And even higher ed institutions kind of forget that there are staff. So you'll hear a lot, and I know that I wrote a lot as a marketer and communicator in higher ed, a lot of focus on equity. And by equity, I mean, diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender, race, socioeconomic status, disability, all of those things are really important for higher ed to communicate that they care about, because it's important for our overall society. But the organizations within them, there's a stratified hierarchy. And I kind of argue I'm also working on my PhD. I'm in dissertation phase right now. I experienced that hierarchy as a staff member in all of these institutions. And I was like, this is something that happens across these institutions. And then I kind of started looking into it and seeing like this kind of happens, whether it's higher education or not. It happens kind of everywhere where there's this hierarchy and this status. And it's harder for people of color. It can be harder for women, even when women might be the majority of a group. So that's how we started talking, Elizabeth, about the fact that like women are the majority of teachers. Women are the majority of nurses. Women may be the majority in public relations. But then when you get to the top of those organizations, it's often men in the top of those organizations. And so they're the ones in leadership, and they're the ones getting paid more. There's the whole pay equity piece. And so that really kind of sparked my interest in going back to school. Going back to school at a later age in my 40s and deciding to research it within my own sphere, which is education, and then focus on that in my dissertation. So I'm going to connect here with the dissertation because all of this is connected to what I think you've probably all heard of, the Great Resignation. After like the pandemic, and I also, I call them the dual pandemics. What happened in 2020 related to George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder and so on. There were these dual pandemics that happened. People really began to rethink their working lives. And all of this really, there was a lot of pressure on women. There's another term called the she session. And that is women leaving work because they had to take care of kids at home. A lot of this work, that double duty falls on women. You know, you may have a job outside of the home, and then inside your home, you have a whole other job because the work still also falls majority on women in the home. So I decided to leave my place of employment, my full-time job, and do something that allowed me more flexibility with Alexander as well as with my research. But then I looked around me and I saw like all of these people leaving at the same time, all these women leaving at the same time, professional women. And so I decided to do my dissertation is called, we don't even have a name, Women Knowledge Workers Exit Higher Education. And that's what my research is. But as I was doing the research and doing my work, I realized that I could actually be doing quite a lot as a consultant, talking to these organizations that actually do want to be doing this equity work, but are missing big pieces of that work within their organizations. And in particular, my work is about doing that work, helping to do that work within higher ed and education nonprofits. They produce a lot of the management research that I'm actually researching to find all this out, but they don't always follow that research themselves. They're not always reading that research themselves. And so that's in part what my goal with equity within is about.
Do you think it is just uneducated or, this information that you have and that you're sharing, is it that people are just too busy to take notice, or they're just not educated, or it's just insignificant to them? What do you think the root is from that?
I think it's the way things have always been done. Okay. It's inertia. So inertia is part of it. And I'm going to speak specifically to higher ed right now. Part of the issue in higher ed and also in nonprofits is they promote leaders who are faculty. Faculty who are really good at whatever it is that they've researched, and they get to be in leadership positions, but they've never had any management training. They've never gone and gotten, any of that information, and then they're responsible for leading teams of people. So you've got business research that comes out of business schools and comes out of also consulting companies like McKinsey, and that informs how businesses operate, and they know this work. And then you've got higher ed and nonprofits that don't know this and aren't receiving that information. So there is an ignorance in that sense within those institutions. Now, when it's more broad and it's like, well, this is happening all over. It's happening in for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. I think it's two things. I think it's the business as usual and that kind of inertia. And then I also think that we as women have often felt like if we do things the way that a man does, it's going to get us into these positions as well. And what I think is happening is I think that there's a shift. I think that we're starting to recognize, and which is why a lot of us are starting our own businesses, is no, we don't have to change or conform. We actually have a lot of skills that we bring, and organizations can start to flourish and form around these different ideas. One of those ideas, and I was listening to some of your previous podcasts, is this idea of when to know, like, hey, I've got enough and I'm ready to give back and share, and not just I've got to keep growing, right? I think that's a kind of a different shift on how to do business. And I think it's one of the things that we bring as women and femmes and people who are kind of been on the outside to ways of thinking about organizations and business.
I love everywhere when you're focused on this equity. I kept coming back to Elizabeth and I are obviously both in real estate. And I think the statistic is hovering around 65% of all realtors are women, right? And so there again, another industry where the majority are women thriving and growing in the organization. Now, I will say in the real estate industry, I'm proud to see women and female leadership emerging at a faster pace. And I'm really curious to think, is that because we're all saying, okay, we're passionate and we're coming from contribution, so we're leaning into and stepping into that gap? But I'm really happy to see that in our industry. Elizabeth, I think you could probably say the same, right? You're seeing more and more females stepping up and leaning in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the power is and all the excitement comes from, because I really think it's more of a confidence, and women are stepping up and supporting each other in different ways.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that makes a big difference. I talk about this all the time too. It's who's your board of directors? Who are you surrounding yourself with? So many times I think women, I mentioned this to y'all, I think before the show, we're our own worst critics. We're really tough on ourselves. And when people outside of yourself start believing in you and start lifting you up, sometimes they believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And that's what you need. That's that spark that you need. So who's in your board of directors? Who is in your circle? Who is going to not only be there to support you and lift you up, but hold you accountable? And it's not always what we want to hear. Those people that are pushing you, and that changes over time. Your board of directors is going to change. You're going to outgrow some people. Some people are going to outgrow you. But the beautiful thing is, as women, I think now that we're getting that confidence, it's not a competition anymore. I think for so long it was a competition, and now we're like, wow, we're great individually, but we are so much stronger together. And let's lift each other up as we climb, no matter what that looks like. So I think that's where maybe a lot of people are giving themselves permission. I think, Yvonne, you gave yourself permission. Hey, there's a need. There's a disconnect somewhere. How can I add value? And what I love about you is that you could have joined an organization or another organization, and you could have been on that totem pole somewhere and added value where they felt it was helpful. And you said, no, I'm going to take that power. I have so much to add and to share. I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to do my own thing and support other women in other ways. So I really think it's a combination of just us getting as women more confident. We have the education, we have the knowledge, we have the business acumen, and then surrounding ourselves with those people that are going to continue to lift us up and help us and let us lift them up as well.
Absolutely. I can say for certain that was a big reason that I made the leap when I did. So I'm in a PhD program, and as a lot of PhD students know that it can be extremely competitive, very within your department, and let alone when you actually go out and try to get a job as a professor. And there are so few jobs that it's competitive for people, within your program, you're competing with each other. But that's not how in my cohort it's been. We've all really helped and supported each other. And in particular, the women in my PhD program really lift each other up. And will, if they have an idea that they think, hey, your research and your lens would be really helpful here, we collaborate instead of competing with each other.
Yep.
Love it.
And I will say too, that when I was thinking about doing this business, my first thought was, I need to have a job and kind of do this on the side, right? And I had coffee with a really good friend of mine, Jessie Newfield, and she said, why? Why are you doing it that way? And I was like, well, I have to. And she's like, I don't think so. I think you actually have everything that you need to kind of jump and do this now. And one of the things you could do is talk to the company you're currently working with, and maybe they could be your first client. And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. That's really risky, but it's a great idea. And then that was also when I thought, well, maybe I actually think I can do this, and I can sell my condo, my dream condo, make some money and have that in the bank as a safety net. and then try to make this leap. And as I was trying to make the leap, I talked to Mindy Galati, who is in Austin. She's an attorney and she works in the diversity, equity, inclusion space. And my 30-minute conversation, it was just a consultation appointment. She gave me so much information. She's like, this is what your skill set is. This is what I think you could charge. She just didn't gatekeep any of that knowledge or information.
Mm.
And so I had this really insightful, intelligent, amazing woman who didn't know me. You know, we had a 30-minute conversation. She did not gatekeep that information. She shared it with me, and it did give me the confidence. And I thought, I can write a proposal with this. I can write a proposal, and that proposal was accepted, and I launched into my business. And so it was truly collaboration and truly a network of amazing women who like helped give me that confidence to do this.
Well, that goes back to Elizabeth mentioning the board of directors that's around us, each and every one of us. And you, in that moment and sense, have found yourself surrounded by others who are there, ready, willing, and able to be uplifting, because we realize that we're helping others and it helps us grow simultaneous. It's been such a phenomenon for me to experience, you know, being newer in some leadership roles over the last 5 years, how much we learn while we're teaching, or how much we learn when we're collaborating. Because collaboration, as we all know, right? Collaboration works because we're focused on contribution to others.
Mm-hmm.
And it still baffles me when I'm in that position and I go, oh my goodness, I'm providing information that I've learned to others. And I feel as though I learn an equal amount simultaneous, which I think is an incredible thing for us all to realize, that in that fact, there should be no reason why we shouldn't be sharing with all those around us, because it's helping us become stronger, more knowledgeable leaders in the areas that we're passionate about every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It feels good. You know, it feels good to work like that. And what you just described is actually one of the gifts of teaching. Period, is that when you're teaching, you learn so much more even from your students than you're giving. And so in this kind of work too, and in working kind of as an entrepreneur, and then reaching out and meeting other women, women who are doing this work as well, wherever they are. It's like I jokingly, but not so jokingly, call it like this orb, like an orb of light that I get to share. And when I meet somebody else who recognizes it, and then they're sharing back, there's this feeling of a really powerful feeling of like growth and healing in that. And so that's kind of how I like to visualize it, as this kind of, you know, orb of light that we kind of share with each other in working this way.
I think it has to do really with intention, right? You talk about leadership and people wanting to climb the ranks. I think it's very different for men than women. Men want to climb the ranks. It's almost like their value is tied to the next role, the next position, climbing. With women, I think it's a lot different. And it's the intention. For us, I mean, I never really saw myself in leadership. I never wanted to be in leadership. But what I started recognizing is, all of a sudden, when you start raising your hand saying, yeah, I'd love to contribute, I'd love to be a part of that, sitting at those tables, right, having those conversations, and then you're inspiring people in ways that you never realized you were inspiring them by just being yourself. I mean, for example, you talk about the woman, Mindy, that just had a conversation with you for 30 minutes. That's probably what she can say in her sleep. That's probably information that she spills out to 30, 40, 50 people, who knows how many people. But that impact it made on you completely transitioned your life. And she probably had no idea that would have happened, or had that expectation or that intention. She was just doing something nice. And hey, I'll add some value if I can. This is what my experience is. But look at the life change it's done for you. This was not just a brief conversation that went like flitted by. From that, it built your confidence. It built your desire. It put your words and thoughts together, and you've launched something pretty remarkable. So if each one of us in our day and in our conversations, we're being intentional and I mean, we're making those conversations with people and connecting with women, no matter where they are in their journey. We could have that impact on one person or two persons or three persons. What will this world look like when we're making an impact in a big way? And I think women have the power to do that very, very differently than men.
And I'll say too that these kinds of masculine ways of doing business are harmful to men as well. And they may have been able to thrive in those environments. But I think that there are men out there who would very much, not only who are, but who would very much thrive in an environment like what we're describing as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that one of my very first paper in my PhD program was about leadership. And I wanted to study what transformational leadership was. And there are traits in transformational leadership that I would deem as very masculine. And one of those is charisma. The way that charisma is described can be very, very masculine, the way that we kind of see this charismatic leader who takes charge. But I wanted to think about leaders who were transformational, who maybe didn't have that kind of charisma. And there's something like kind of feminine about it that men and women can access. And I would say Mr. Rogers is one of those, a transformational leader who was very much in the vein of how we're talking right now and the ways that we're describing. I think when I don't know if you've watched the show, there's a really popular show right now. I'm not gonna remember it. It's either on Netflix or Hulu, and it's about a coach who's a leader. And I think that his leadership style.
Ted Lasso.
Yes, yeah,
he's amazing.
It's amazing, right? It's kind of like the leadership that we're describing now. So I think that it's accessible to men and women. I think women are starting to move into that. They're leaning in, but they're not leaning in trying to do what was done before. That kind of competitive way. They're bringing in traits that we consider feminine to that leadership, and it has the potential to transform leadership for everybody.
They're taking out the ego.
Yeah.
That's powerful. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your slogan for Equity Within, co-creating compassionate and equitable education communities that help heal our hurting systems one organization at a time. Tell us more.
Yeah.
So I think, and this goes back, Elizabeth, to your question about why does this kind of thing keep happening? I think our systems, the foundation of our systems, the way that they were, how do I put it? The way that our organizations are still built on a factory model. They're still built on, and our education system's built that way too, as if people are like widgets, and as if people are building widgets, right? And in the factory model, you have this one thing that you do really well, and the goal is just do it harder and faster. Work harder and do it faster. That's not the way that our world is anymore, for the most part, in these kinds of like education organizations or nonprofit organizations. They're about creating new knowledge. They're about creativity and building new things and innovation. And so doing something faster and treating people like they're widgets doesn't make sense in that kind of organization. But that's the way that we still operate. And that's why the hierarchy is the way that it is, and so on. And I think those are not compassionate organizations either. And so I think that what we are learning, and this comes out of research on psychological safety by Amy Edmondson, is that in our organizations, the more that we have psychological safety, the more that we have ability and to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and those kinds of things, the better off our organizations will be. So I think that our organizations, just like us as people right now, have a lot of hurt embedded within them, And I think that by combining the management research with what education research also tells us, combining those two things, we have the power to like heal some of that hurt within the organizations. I also, I believe that we should think of our organizations as communities. And that when we think of organizations as communities and not this kind of like hierarchy and competitive kind of, way that we see organizations, and think of them as people who are bringing their whole selves, into work, who are bringing their gifts, and you want to create a place where people can bring their gifts to work, and share them with each other in order for whatever the common goal is for your organization. The more we think about these organizations as actual communities, the more chance we have for them to be successful and to be healing places rather than places we have to flee from, like we did during the Great Resignation.
That's really interesting. And I keep going back to just the conversation right before too, and tied into what you just shared. And I keep thinking about you as a single mom raising a strong Black man, 16-year-old. And I have the gift of hindsight because I've got to see Alexander grow up, and I see who he was when he was in elementary school, and who you were as a mom. I mean, you were there. He played basketball with Tripp, and you were there, right? And it's, again, being a single mom is probably, it's got to be the hardest thing in the world. I would always joke when Wes traveled and I was like, I'm a single mom, but I really wasn't, because I had a lot of the support and the systems, even though he wasn't physically there. But I also think being a single mom's hard just because you're the entertainment. I always joke, I'm like, I have 4. I mean, if mine are bored or they want to go fight with somebody, I was like, you got 3 other people to go find. I mean, for you, it's you. You're it, right?
Yes.
But I've watched him, and I mean, obviously having conversations with you, I've watched him grow into an amazing young man, right? And what does he think about all this? Like, he's watched you, he's watched your struggles, he's watched your growth, he's watched your achievements. Tell me, what is that looking like as you're raising him? He's seeing you turn into, not that you've never been, but you're coming into your own, and you're showing, I'm a boss, babe. I've got this. What's his thought on all of this? I mean, I think he's probably cheering you on. Just, I know Alexander, but tell me, share with me what that looks like.
He's super proud. He's super proud.
Aww.
And super encouraging. He has watched, and it's interesting seeing his perspective now that he's older, looking back on things that I did that he just kind of took for granted, as our kids do. Yeah. So I was very involved, as involved as I could be in his school and his after school and all of that. And during middle school, I was on the campus advisory council all 3 years and co-president the last year, while working full time and in my doc program. And it was hard. And he, there are times that he struggled, and I kind of blamed being a single parent, and then saw my other, 2 parent friends, talking about the same kind of stuff that our kids were all going through. But he's now, and I'm this semester, I'm homeschooling him as well.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing I forgot about. I mean, he's lost her mind a little bit, but that's
okay. Where's your cape? Yes, wait, I need to see your cape. Let's see.
I know.
Yeah. It's been fun to do that. It was actually something I'd always wanted to do, but because I worked in an office and everything, I couldn't do. So being able to work and create my own schedule allows me the flexibility to be able to homeschool him too, and to do it, teach, and I have that teaching background as well. What I'm, I would really not only like for him to learn, but like learn what he is very interested in, and then add and build upon that. And it also allows us to, we'll be traveling during the summer, which will also be part of his schooling, and be able to do those kinds of things too. But he's watched, like, I defended my dissertation proposal, which is the step before you actually start your dissertation, this spring, and he was there, and he could watch me do that. He has seen my colleagues. One of them defended her actual dissertation a couple of weeks ago, and he was there, and he was listening and learning and seeing people, seeing women, seeing his mom doing something, going back and getting my PhD was something I've wanted to do for many, many, many years. And he's seeing me do it. he's recognized now, like, wait a minute, you were co-president of the campus advisory council. That's like a big deal. I'm like, yeah, it was a big deal. And I was doing it not only to advocate for you and advocate for students like you within the public school system and within your school. He's starting to recognize those things. But I will tell you, Elizabeth, one of the things he said to me, we were reading a book. I have also restarted reading to him at night, even though he's 16.
I love it.
And yeah, it's been great. Like, it's like tucking him in. And reading to him like this. We're reading this amazing book called Legend Born right now. And every time we close the chapter, we both talk about how good the book is and how wonderful it is. And he said, Mom, you could do that if you wanted to. Like, if you wanted to write a book like that, you could totally do that. He's like, I feel like you are so talented, but you've only like hit just the piece of the talent that you actually have. I think you could do anything that you put your mind to. I know. And this
you're a 16-year-old.
From a 16-year-old, Yvonne. That's usually what the parents are saying to the kid.
Right.
Yeah.
We're all moms of 16-year-olds on this call right now, by the way. We all have 16-year-old boys. So I understand the impact of that.
Yeah. It was huge. And it felt like, as Elizabeth, I know, I lost both of my parents right before the pandemic. My dad in 2018 and my mom in 2019. And I swear it felt like the kind of thing that I wanted to hear, from my parents coming out of the mouth of my son. And so that was just really a very powerful moment. But that's what he is seeing. And it's a huge kind of life lesson for him that to seeing me doing this work.
You're sharing something, life lesson for him as well. Yes. I'm pretty passionate about work-life balance doesn't exist. In my opinion, it doesn't exist. And whatever blurred lines there were prior to the pandemic, in my opinion, it became even more blurred. But rather, what I talk a lot about when I'm coaching real estate agents or speaking is about work-life integration.
Yes.
And what you're sharing, the way that you're integrating and giving that access and exposure for your son is critically important. And I think that sometimes, whether it's we as women or we as parents, there can be judgmental. Like, I work with my husband. We're in the same industry together. I've felt judged before many a times about, well, do you talk about work at the dinner table? Do you create separation? Are you having date night? Are you having family time? All of that. Here's the thing. I'm real confident about what I'm doing as a parent. I know I'm making mistakes, but I know the integration that we're doing in our household has its trade-offs as well. And know it has its benefits and gains, just like you're saying your son is experiencing. To me, the exposure you're giving him to see mom, strong female leader, thriving, making mistakes, right? Being in the moment with you, I think is one of the most important things that we can do, not only as leaders, but as parents. And I applaud you for doing that. I think we should support each other in that journey as parents more often, rather than the times sometimes I think we're judged because of, well, you work too much or you do this too much. No, I think I'm wanting to just be emerging with my kids and include them to be a part of the journey along the way so they can see the work that's invested.
Yes. I completely agree with you. And I love that term, work-life integration. I think it's super important. I had an experience just this weekend where I took something that I do at work, where when we have, say we're a process that we're trying to critique, we've been doing this roses, thorns and buds process. Like, these are the things that we really like. Here are some of the sticky issues. And then here are the buds, what's emerged from this conversation that we want to take forward. It occurred to me, because I'm also now in a relationship where we're blending families. And we decided to sit at the table and have like this discussion about some stuff that was tough, for us. And I thought, I could do this roses, but thorns, buds thing here in home too.
Yep.
And we did, and it worked really well, and everybody liked it. But it was kind of one of those examples of, again, it connects, Renee, with that concept of, being in community.
Mm-hmm.
Our home is a community, and if work is also a community, then there is this integration of the tools that we use, the learning that happens, the growth. And I think that's that concept we then take also outside into our communities.
Yeah. What do you, I mean, you've got so many things. I'm so excited for you. I've watched you. I celebrate alongside you. There's so many people celebrating you, but what's next for you? What are you most excited about?
So I'm really excited about finishing my dissertation. One of the things that I'm doing in my dissertation I'm super excited about is I just received a dissertation fellowship from the Hogg Foundation for mental health. And it was a $20,000 investment in finishing my dissertation. And what I'm doing is I have 16 participants in my dissertation study, which are all women who left a single institution of higher ed during the Great Resignation. These are professional women. And one of the things that I had heard in my interviews of the women was a feeling of trauma, trauma within the experiences of working within the organization. And I did not want to just hear that information and just, take it and turn it into my dissertation. I thought, how can this research also be a form of healing? And so that's what I wrote in my application for the Hogg Foundation of Mental Health, that I would like to actually do this research project in a way that the participants come feeling better because they participated. And so I'll be hiring a culturally responsive therapist, and then a body worker, somebody who maybe does yoga or something like that, for women who are participating in the research, to kind of address some of that, the experience of trauma that they had in their workplace. I'm really excited about that work. And I would like to, after the dissertation is done, there are academic-y things that I will do with it, but I also want to write a book that is accessible to anybody to read, not written in academic language, so that other people who are in other organizations can learn from what we do in the dissertation, what comes out of it, as well as for folks who are doing research on populations and with other populations, to think about how their work can not just extract, but can also give back to the people who are participating. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm really excited about, I've had some invitations to speak to some other groups, other universities as well, about the research. I'm really excited about the ability to speak and kind of share what I'm learning with other people, and to learn from them and their organizations as well.
Do you sleep?
I do. And I really need my sleep. I'm not one of those people who, can.
I had to ask, because I'm like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure there's a cape under there somewhere, and I'm wondering when you sleep. I'm just saying.
I do. I don't watch a lot of television. So there's that. And I do think, though, Renee, that it is partly that integration, and figuring out how I can leverage something that I've done before. So, for example, I homeschooled Xander, and I did, I used Google Classroom and actually had stuff in there for him, and, it would populate on his phone. And then a friend of mine said, those classes that you've done for him, you might actually be able to repackage that, And I thought, that's a really good idea. When I speak, I've spoken to a couple of classes on gendered organizations, repackaging that not just as a speech, but as like a mini class that people could do on their own. Those are things that I'm intending to do as well. So taking the work that I've done and, repackaging it so that I can kind of market that, and not have to do double work, is like working smarter. But no, I need a full 8 to 9 hours of sleep. I have to.
You're like me. And I love what you say about repurposing it, because you're right. People are learning, and they absorb information by different mediums, right? I'm not a big television person as well, But you think about it, if you're just putting the information in one area, you're going to miss out on a whole bunch of people that need that information
Right.
if you would just repurpose it and restructure it a little bit differently. So I think that's a brilliant idea, because now your reach is so much bigger
Right.
than it could have been before. Yeah.
Right.
Impact.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love it. And it's funny because Renee and I talk about this too. And she's like, do you ever sleep? And when you're passionate about something, right, it's not work. It's just what you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
And it oozes out of you. I mean, we can see in even your post, even in your written word. I don't even have to see you face to face. I don't have to have you on a podcast, but I can see that passion coming out in everything you do. And when you have that kind of passion, you're meant to do that. That's what you were built for.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for embracing that, for just stepping out in faith, because that's incredibly hard. And because of that one act, you're going to impact so many others now and in the future. So I'm so proud for you. So proud for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we always have one last question. This is a hard one. Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
You got this. What does leadership from the heart mean to you?
It's a good question. Gosh, it's so much of what we touched on. There's so much of what we touched on today. I think a lot of times we think that leadership is supposed to be, like up here, this like your intellectual pursuit and, and all of that. Leadership from the heart is about the care and compassion and what Bell Hooks would call radical love. That ultimately, I'm kind of a reluctant leader. I've not seen myself as a leader. I'm doing work that I'm passionate about, and I'm trying to make my corner of the world a little better. My having been here, make the world better in some way, whatever my gifts and talents are, and then to join with others who are like-minded, and who are trying to make the world better in whatever it is that they do as well. And that's very heart-centered. That is coming from a place of radical love for myself and for my community. And that community is, whether it's in my home or it's in my workplace or it's, beyond that in my city and my state and so on. The community expands, right, as we get to know people. And as I mentioned last night on Facebook, whether we know them only through the internet, that those folks are community. And that's the, like, that sense of purpose is what, is where I'm is the reason I do the work that I do. And is what I think leadership from the heart is about.
Well, I will say you are making a difference. You are making your world better. You make my world better knowing you. I'm so blessed to have you as a friend.
Thank you.
We are so honored that you came and shared some of your time and your knowledge and your passion with us today.
Thank you so much for your time. You certainly impacted this little corner. It's not so little, though, Yvonne. You're building something big. I can feel it. We can all feel it.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I'm so honored to be here with you today to talk to you both. Elizabeth, from the first time that we met, which I think, our kids already knew each other, but we met on the basketball court, watching our boys fumble around with that ball.
Yeah.
You just have always been somebody in my corner, and I really appreciate that. I'm glad that you and Renee do the work that you do, and that you've also created this medium to share more of these ideas, which I think are really important.
Very much so, my friend. All right. Well, we will keep watching you and cheering you on, and anything we can ever do to serve you, to reach out. But we are going to let everybody go now, and thank you for all of you for sharing with us today. Yvonne, if they want to find you, if there are people in the space that you are serving, what is the best way for them to reach you?
Okay. My website is equitywithin.com. And they can email me at Yvonne, Yvonne, @equitywithin.com.
Easy enough.
Yes.
All right, my friend, keep doing great things, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.